I want to begin by asking a very simple question. And that is to say that after the passing of President Rawlings, there seems to be a meeting of minds about the fact that he was not only a great man, he was a great Ghanaian and great African. But what will be left of a great man if his great works are taken away from him? Everybody becomes ordinary without great works. It is the great works that make the difference between an ordinary man and a great man. So I want to ask another question as to how best, if we all know that President Rawlings was a great man, a great statesman, how best can we honor his memory? And my view is that the best way of honoring the memory of a great man is to continue doing what he would have done if he were to be alive. And that is why I think that this vigil is a very important contribution to his memory. We all know that every December 31st, the cadres and the NDC observe the beginning of the revolution by keeping vigil at these same grounds. So that is why the leadership of the party felt that the best way to start honoring our fallen hero is to begin with this vigil. President Rawlings, when he was alive, did not take pleasure in monuments being named after him. In fact, there were several occasions where he resisted the attempt to name monuments after him. His life also showed that he abhorred ostentatious living and ostentatious funerals and ceremonies. He kept reminding us that the best tribute we can keep to his memory is to hold dearly the principles of June 4th, based upon which the NDC was established. And so, my dear comrades, I believe strongly that the way to keep President Rawlings alive is to observe the principles of June 4th, to keep on practicing what he cherished most, and for my comrades in the Keda fraternity, for us to be reminding ourselves about the simple things he did to show that he cared for his fellow Ghanaian. President Rawlings showed in many ways that leadership is done by example. So even as he called for communal labor, he will not be sitting in his office. You will see him right there in the trenches, in the gutters of Nima, holding shovel and desilting gutters. Now, if you see the leader engaged in what he's admonishing the followers to do, who will not follow that leader? he also admonished us that in the past, it was sufficient to blame our offenses on directions from above and from our superiors. But June 4th taught us that it is wrong, and that every individual has a conscience, every individual has a duty to this nation. And so if you are given instructions which you consider to be injurious to the welfare of the state, you have the right to defy those instructions and to resist. And that was what came to be known as positive defiance. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe sincerely that what is missing in our democracy, which is creating problems of corruption, nepotism, and lack of transparency, is the lack of the spirit of positive defiance. We have all the institutions which are designed to check the abuse of power. Our problem is the attitude of the people who populate the institutions. If politicians order security men to turn the guns they have been armed with to protect the citizens into suppressing the citizens they are intended to protect, we expect that professional security men will say, no, sir. We have sworn to defend the citizens, so we are on the side of the citizens against the abuse of power. But how many of our security men can do that? If public servants are impressed upon by politicians to create opportunities for the politicians to loot the state resources, with the spirit of positive defiance, we expect the chief directors, and other public servants to say, no, sir. We have sworn to protect this nation. But what is happening today, the nepotism we are seeing, the corruption we are seeing, which in several ways can be said to be worse than what prevailed before the June 4th. It is happening because we have abandoned the important principle of positive defiance. So the best way to remember President Rawlings is for us to go back, not to be reciting the principles, but to find out what those principles mean to our democratic survival, and to pledge to live by them. The first few people who want to practice positive defiance may suffer for it, but eventually they will prove to be martyrs who have sacrificed their lives to save this our democracy. Again, President Rawlings spoke constantly about accountability. Many of us just mentioned probity, accountability, without taking a step to find out what does accountability mean. There are a lot of people who think that when we talk about accountability, it's just about accounting for money. Money is part of it. But the most important way to hold ourselves accountable is to account for power and authority. Because we have been told by cadres, and we reduce it into singing, that power belongs to the people forever and ever. It is from this that we learn that anybody who finds himself in a position of power is just there in a position of trust. Hold the power, utilize the power to protect the masses, to seek the welfare of the masses, and to account to the people at the appropriate time as to how that power has been utilized. And one key principle means of holding people to account for how they use their power is through free, fair, and transparent elections. So if we are all preaching that we want to honor President Rawlings, let's honor him by keeping the structures that can hold people in power to account for how they use the power that has been entrusted into them by the masses. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I believe I have spoken enough since the demise of our founder. But I want to remind all of us that the little things that President Rawlings took pleasure in doing, we believe that his memory shall be better observed by doing some of the things that he took pleasure in doing during this time of mourning him. I have mentioned his pleasure in accompanying the masses to undertake communal labor. And I want to believe that the party followers throughout the country can best honor his memory by at least dedicating one day in your various constituencies, in your various branches, to undertake a massive clean-up exercise in remembrance of President Rawlings. On the eve of every June 4th celebration, we undertook route marches. If you don't know route march, you can turn it into this modern day keep fit, health walks, and so on. I want to believe strongly that one of the best ways to honor the memory of President Rawlings is for the party rank and file in their various branches, constituencies, and regions to undertake these route marches on the days to be determined by them according to their traditional calendars. I believe that if this is done, President Rawlings will be smiling wherever he is. And finally, the principles are good, but they remain impotent without our power to implement them. So if you are in opposition, you may have the best of ideas, but you cannot implement them. You can only be reciting them. So the best tribute we can pay to the memory of our founder is to accomplish the rescue mission that will position us to implement the principles he lived and died for. He taught us that in every struggle, when comrades fall, we walk over their bodies to ensure that the mission is accomplished before we come to count the dead. So, ladies and gentlemen, be fired up by the temporary demise of our founder to win these elections and rescue this nation, Ghana, which was dear to his heart, from the very ills he has fought against all his life. Corruption today is worse than what he fought against on the occasion of June 4th. Nepotism today is worse than what occasioned the June 4th. So how can we say that President Rawlings has been a good man, he has been an African, and yet all the things he lived and died for will not be commemorated? We will abandon them and still pretend that we are honoring his memory. Ladies and gentlemen, let us walk our talk. Let us fight to come to power. Let us revisit the idea of June 4th becoming one of the national holidays. We can only do this when we are in power. In opposition, it cannot be done. If the current government thinks that President Rawlings was a great man, then let them honor his great works. And his great works can be remembered if we observe June 4th, at least for one day when the nation will stand still, go back and review what June 4th stood for, and to re-energize ourselves to live by the principles of June 4th. I thank you very much, and may President Rawlings live forever.